Traore blocks 57 trucks at border. What were they really carrying? 57 trucks seized at the border. Hidden inside, not food, not aid, but enough weapons to arm an entire army. Who sent them, and what was the real plan behind this secret convoy? Stay with us, because what investigators uncovered could change the future of Africa. At the break of dawn on August 16, 2025, Burkina Faso witnessed an operation that would soon be etched into the country's history. What unfolded at the border was not just an ordinary inspection, but a decisive move led personally by President Ibrahim Traoré. Security forces had been monitoring unusual activity in the Canary region, an area close to the Togo border known for its quiet nights and empty roads. Yet, on this particular night, a long convoy of heavy trucks was seen moving slowly through back routes, raising immediate suspicion. 57 trucks in total, each one appearing to carry humanitarian aid, moved at an hour when no legitimate delivery would normally be scheduled. The timing, the choice of route, and the unusual coordination all pointed to something bigger than what was visible on the surface. The observation was swiftly communicated to higher authorities, and in an unprecedented decision, President Traoré himself took command. He did not delegate the responsibility to lower officials. Instead, he made the bold call to personally oversee the interception, ensuring that the response was both cautious and precise. The order was clear and uncompromising. Special forces were dispatched under the leadership of General Ibrahim Zerbo. Advanced surveillance tools, including drones and helicopters, tracked the movement of the trucks as they approached the crossing. The convoy's attempt to quietly slip through the night was met with a prepared ambush. At exactly 4 in the morning, the trucks were stopped in their tracks. Drivers tried to scatter in panic, but the operation had been planned with discipline. Within minutes, all drivers were in custody and the trucks were secured. The first inspection shattered every assumption. Beneath neatly stacked sacks labeled as food aid were weapons of war, rifles, rocket launchers, grenades, and ammunition. Every truck revealed the same chilling truth. The scale of the discovery shocked even the most seasoned officers. This was no ordinary smuggling attempt. This was an organized infiltration of military-grade weapons into the heart of Burkina Faso. The decision of the president to personally lead the mission reflected the seriousness of the threat. By being directly involved, Traoré sent a message that no plot against the sovereignty of Burkina Faso would be tolerated or treated lightly. The seizure of 57 trucks was not just about preventing weapons from crossing the border. It was about exposing a hidden operation of enormous scale. The location of the interception added to the gravity of the moment. The Canary region, with its remote paths, had been deliberately chosen by those orchestrating the plot, hoping to avoid major checkpoints. But the vigilance of local patrols, combined with swift presidential action, turned what could have been a national tragedy into a moment of protection. The images of dozens of captured trucks lined up under military guard began circulating, and the story spread like wildfire across the nation. Citizens were left asking how so many weapons could be disguised as humanitarian aid and what the ultimate goal had been. The early morning seizure made clear that Burkina Faso was not just guarding its borders, it was defending its very future from forces determined to destabilize it. When the seized trucks were finally opened and inspected, the sheer magnitude of what lay inside was staggering. What had first appeared as sacks of food and supplies carefully arranged to resemble humanitarian aid turned out to be nothing less than a hidden arsenal. Beneath the cover of ordinary packaging were military-grade weapons stacked in massive quantities. Investigators quickly began cataloging the contents, and the numbers told a story of extraordinary scale. Inside the convoy were rifles of different models, both AK-47s and M16s, rocket launchers, hand grenades, explosives, and even anti-aircraft missiles. The total value of the cargo was estimated at over $700 million, a figure that shocked even the highest levels of government. This was not the kind of operation that could be pulled off by small-time smugglers. The logistics, the coordination, and the financing all pointed toward powerful backers with access to enormous resources. The discovery raised an immediate and urgent question. Who had the capacity to fund and organize such a massive shipment, and for what purpose? Security experts and military officials who examined the weapons noted that they came from diverse origins. Some bore the markings of old stockpiles from conflict zones in Libya, others matched weapons previously identified in Yemen, and some were brand new, straight from modern factories. This mix of sources revealed a supply chain stretching across continents, involving multiple channels of procurement and smuggling. The fact that the serial numbers on many items had been deliberately erased or tampered with suggested an effort to cover tracks and make tracing difficult. Yet, even with these efforts, investigators managed to uncover partial records that began to shed light on where the weapons originated. What was clear from the start was that the cargo had not been assembled for local bandits or opportunistic rebels. It was a fully equipped military stockpile, enough to arm thousands of fighters and sustain long-term conflict. For Burkina Faso, a country already fighting to protect its sovereignty, this was not simply a threat. It was a potential catastrophe narrowly avoided. The shock inside the government was evident when the full inventory was laid before the National Security Council. Ministers and generals examined the lists in disbelief. Tens of thousands of rifles, millions of rounds of ammunition, thousands of explosives, and heavy weaponry capable of downing aircraft. With such firepower, insurgent groups or coup plotters could have overwhelmed the army, destabilized cities, and spread chaos across the region. Defense officials remarked that with this arsenal, one could not only destabilize Burkina Faso, but potentially invade a neighboring state. The implication was terrifying. Whoever organized this shipment was not merely smuggling arms for profit. They were preparing for a decisive operation, one that would change the balance of power in the region. Every box opened, every weapon logged, deepened the sense that Burkina Faso had just intercepted something far bigger than a simple act of trafficking. It was evidence of a hidden war being prepared, financed with hundreds of millions of dollars, and aimed directly at the heart of national stability. As the investigation progressed, the reality of the threat became clearer. The intercepted convoy was not just a case of criminal smuggling, but a direct assault on the stability of Burkina Faso. Intelligence reports pieced together by security services revealed that the weapons were not meant to vanish into black markets or be sold off in fragments. Instead, they were destined for carefully selected storage sites where they would be redistributed to armed groups inside the country. The presence of such a vast stockpile indicated planning on a strategic level. It was not about immediate profit, but about building the capacity for sustained conflict. Officials began to uncover evidence that tied the operation to a larger conspiracy involving actors both within Burkina Faso and outside its borders. Documents and testimonies collected from captured drivers pointed to instructions that came from multiple layers of coordination. While most drivers claimed ignorance, insisting they were told the shipments were industrial parts or agricultural machinery, at least one admitted he was aware the loads were destined for warehouses near Ouagadougou. This single admission opened a door into the network behind the plan. The National Intelligence Directorate launched a deeper probe, tracing phone records, intercepted messages, and financial transfers linked to the convoy. What they discovered painted a troubling picture. Certain former officials, businessmen, and even retired military officers had been in contact with intermediaries managing the logistics of the trucks. These contacts were not isolated. They formed a chain that pointed toward a coordinated attempt to destabilize the government from within. The implication was severe. Traders inside the country were working hand in hand with external sponsors to bring down the state. Security analysts warned that if the weapons had reached their intended recipients, the consequences would have been devastating. Terror groups could have been armed overnight with the capacity to launch widespread attacks. Opposition groups, already vocal against the government, might have been emboldened to escalate unrest. And elements within the armed forces sympathetic to regime change could have used the arsenal to stage a coup. Every possibility outlined by investigators pointed to the same conclusion. The cache was designed to ignite chaos and dismantle national order beyond domestic threats. The evidence also highlighted foreign involvement. Traces of the weapons' origins led back to conflict zones that had long been used as dumping grounds for surplus arms. Experts identified patterns consistent with smuggling routes across Libya and the Sahel, where international arms dealers and shadow networks often operate with the backing of hidden financiers. The presence of modern, factory new weapons in the mix was even more alarming. It suggested recent procurement from official supply chains, raising suspicions about which governments or corporations may have allowed the arms to slip into illicit circulation. For Burkina Faso, this was not only a matter of law enforcement, but a matter of sovereignty. The sheer scale of the shipment made it impossible to dismiss as random criminal activity. It represented a deliberate attempt to destabilize the country by overwhelming its defenses and sowing division among its people. With domestic conspirators ready to act and foreign sponsors providing the means, the discovery of the 57 trucks became a turning point, exposing the depth of the threat facing the nation. When President Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation after the seizure of the 57 trucks, the moment carried far more weight than a routine press statement. The setting was carefully chosen, a public stage where the confiscated weapons were displayed in towering stacks behind him, making it impossible to ignore the magnitude of what had been stopped. Citizens across Burkina Faso and viewers abroad saw with their own eyes crates of rifles, rocket launchers, and ammunition piled higher than soldiers standing guard. The visual impact spoke louder than words, yet Traoré's speech turned the discovery into a moment of national and continental awakening. He began by declaring that this was not merely a smuggling case, but a direct attack on Burkina Faso's sovereignty and, by extension, on Africa's right to self-determination. His words cut through the silence with urgency, framing the incident as part of a broader strategy to destabilize nations and impose foreign agendas through hidden warfare. He reminded his people and the world that Africa was not asleep, that leaders and citizens were now vigilant against such manipulations. In his address, Traoré linked the intercepted convoy to historical examples of how other nations in the region had been torn apart. He spoke of Libya, Syria, and Yemen, countries once stable but later destroyed by conflicts fueled with outside interference and covert support for armed groups. His message was clear. Burkina Faso refused to be the next victim of that pattern. As he held up documents recovered from the operation, he explained that the evidence showed deliberate planning, not random chance. The weapons were organized for coordinated distribution, not for opportunistic smuggling. His firm tone was meant to reassure the public that the government had not only acted swiftly, but also understood the larger forces at play. For the citizens watching, the speech was more than a report on a security operation. It was a rallying cry for unity in the face of attempts to divide them. Crowds in the streets responded with chants of victory and support, turning fear into determination. The president's words resonated beyond national borders. International journalists at the press conference pressed him with questions about which countries or groups were behind the plot, and while he held back certain details, he hinted strongly at the involvement of foreign powers. By refusing to name every actor outright, he added weight to the seriousness of the investigation while leaving room for diplomacy. Yet the symbolism of displaying the arsenal in public made a bold statement to the world. Burkina Faso had proof of external meddling, and it would not be silenced. His declaration that this was an attack not just on his country, but on Africa as a whole struck a chord with leaders in neighboring states, many of whom faced similar pressures. In this way, Traoré transformed a national crisis into a continental message of defiance. He positioned Burkina Faso as a defender of African sovereignty, standing firm against external forces that sought to impose control through weapons and chaos. The speech, paired with the dramatic evidence, ensured that the interception was remembered not only as a security success, but as a moment of political and symbolic power that reverberated across Africa and beyond. After the weapons were cataloged and secured, President Ibrahim Traoré announced a decision that turned a moment of crisis into a vision of transformation. Instead of allowing the seized arsenal to remain a symbol of fear, he declared that it would be melted down and repurposed into tools for nation building. The announcement captured the imagination of the public. He explained that the steel from rifles and rocket launchers would be converted into infrastructure, into schools for children, hospitals for families, and canals to irrigate farmland. What was meant to destroy Burkina Faso would instead become the foundation for its future. The idea was not only practical but profoundly symbolic. It marked a shift from seeing weapons as instruments of domination to seeing them as raw material for progress. Citizens who had been shaken by the discovery of the Convoy now saw hope in the plan. The same tools designed to fuel war would give rise to classrooms where children could learn in safety and clinics where lives could be saved. The promise of transformation was reinforced by a powerful demonstration. In a public ceremony, the first rifle from the seized shipment was dropped into a blazing furnace. Before thousands of people gathered in the capital, molten metal was poured into a mold and reshaped into a school bell. As the president rang it, he declared that every morning it would remind children of peace and resilience rather than violence. The crowd erupted in cheers, and the moment was broadcast internationally, showing the world how Burkina Faso was turning a conspiracy of destruction into a declaration of independence and dignity. This act of reshaping weapons into instruments of life drew global attention. Observers from the United Nations and the African Union called it a historic step, a unique moment where a country chose to transform its vulnerability into strength. Instead of hiding the weapons away or selling them off, the government made them a public testament to resilience and renewal for the people of Burkina Faso. The plan went beyond symbolism. It addressed urgent needs. Villages still lacked basic infrastructure, schools were overcrowded, and hospitals were underfunded. By redirecting resources seized from the operation, Traore signaled that the government was serious about turning national defense into national development. The promise of 100 new schools, 50 health clinics, and 1,000 kilometers of irrigation canals gave concrete meaning to the victory. Every citizen could imagine how the weapons meant for conflict would now improve daily life. The idea resonated especially with young people who saw in the plan a chance for their generation to inherit something better than fear and instability. It also inspired other African nations watching closely as leaders and activists began to speak of following a similar path. By turning weapons into development, Burkina Faso not only strengthened itself, but also set an example of how Africa could reclaim its future from the grip of violence and foreign interference. What began as a border interception grew into a defining symbol of renewal and a bold message that the people of Burkina Faso would choose life over destruction, unity over division, and progress over despair.